Welcome to another session of the Industry Series Dialogue. I'm Pragya Mishra, and I'm heading the Customer Success and Operations Department at Courseplay. Courseplay is a 360-degree employee growth platform. In a world demanding more than just strong teams, learning to influence provides the roadmap. And in today's discussion, we discover how to actively build and transform your culture, ensuring lasting impact. To delve deeper into this, we have Pawan Sriram, who is a global L&D leader with over 2 decades of experience shaping talent and organizational culture for thousands worldwide. Pawan is currently the director of L&D at Enquora. Welcome to this session, Pawan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you. It's a great opportunity to be here and share my thoughts on culture and leadership development and all the things that we're going to talk about today.
Thank you so much. Now, before I delve into the first question, I saw a very interesting photo of yours on LinkedIn, which is the banner of you holding the Indian flag. Can you tell me more about that first?
Yeah, well, this is a race, or this is an event, a milestone in my life I'll never forget. It's always it was always my dream to run in Ladakh. And when I heard about this run being organized at about 13,000 feet, and with the thin air, which is unforgiving, with those breathtaking views, and there's the spirit of fellow Ladakhis running along. We had about 3,000, 4,000 people across the world running, because it's the highest sea level marathon that you can really have. Uh, from an experience of doing that, well, you always learn a few things. One, you kind of realize the silence of the mountains, the echoes that you get when you're running through those landscapes, the sound of your own breath, and all of that. But at the end of the day, running at 13,000 feet has its own risks and disadvantages. You need to save as much oxygen as possible. Your body begins to slow down, but you end up thinking, saying, okay, I will finish this. It can't be the fastest that you can run, but you kind of endurance, your patience, your perseverance gets you there. But I came back with a lot of clarity in my head, a lot of pride, and the reason I put up that is always reminds me that for everything that you do in life, you're a small part of those big mountains that you are, the big scene that you see, the big picture that you see. You're just a small dot, a small stone. And what that journey that's rewarding. I learned a lot of my life's lessons and everything that I had to do. So yeah, hopefully we can do that again sometime. Very humbling experience though.
That image is very inspiring. The moment anyone lands into your LinkedIn profile, they see a strong, resilient leader. So that intrigued me.
Yeah.
So let's begin with a big picture thought.
Sure.
In your view, what does it really mean for a leader to shape culture and not just manage a team?
Quite a relevant question to start with. And for the longest time, if you see, leadership has been associated with managing outcomes. Like, are we hitting the right goals? Are my tasks on track? Am I performing efficiently as a leader or a manager? Are my teams looking up to me when I delegate something and I'm getting it done at the end of the day? But while all of this is important, today's workplace that we are all a part of is asking something deeper from leaders, not from leaders, anyone across the globe, across cultures, across regions, be it a technology leader, be it a business leader. So it's no longer enough to manage what your people do. We need leaders who can shape a thought process, who can connect, who can behave in a certain way, who can empathize with the situation. And this has to happen when no one is watching. And I think that is actually the definition of culture that I have always thought of. At a recent panel discussion that I was a part of, one of the HR leaders who was sitting amongst us made a very interesting comment, and I felt that is so true. that culture isn't built in strategy decks or all any of the policy manuals that we all see. It's actually built in micro moments that I call in how leaders respond to failure, how do they manage success, how they listen in more actively into meetings, how they're able to celebrate somebody's achievement, and at the end of the day also handle dissent, disappointment, and failures. So when I talk about learning to influence, we're actually talking about how leaders in some way become architects of shaping this culture in an organization. They might be one of the architects because we're expecting all the leaders in their organization to talk a similar language in a particular way. So that's how I would look at it.
That's a powerful statement that you made, especially the one where you said, leaders have to influence and they have to take decisions, especially
Yeah.
when no one is watching, empathizing with their
Yeah.
members. That is so important, especially in today's world where it's a job is not just about getting up, going to your office and completing the tasks. It is way more than that.
Yeah.
That does make a lot of sense. And do you think influence is becoming more important than authority in today's workplace? Have you seen any moment when someone without a formal title had a bigger cultural impact than someone who actually held a title?
Yeah, absolutely. See, this is something that all of us are seeing, especially given the hybrid and the global teams. And I personally believe influence is the new currency of leadership. Your title might give you access to a few things, you might be privileged, but your influence is what creates that real behavioral change amongst people, right? Amongst people that you manage, amongst the people that you work with, family, friends, anyone around you. um, and when I think of this, maybe I can share a quick story.
Yeah,
So
please.
there was this young engineer in my previous organization, no formal title, no formal authority, and she initiated this interesting thing called a story circle, where she invited her own colleagues, and it's a small team of 10, 12 people, and they were asked to share things that didn't go well, and what did they learn, what was the setback, how did they manage failures. And believe me, in a matter of few sessions, people felt heard, they felt connected. It was very human, and I think that taught me when I observed how change can happen when teams come together. And that's actually cultural change if you look at it, because it's sparked by someone who's simply acted out of their empathy, and they wanted to make it more consistent when they communicate, and they just want to be heard. So to answer your question, it's actually a yes, because influence is no longer a nice to have. It is a critical leadership capability, but it has to be demonstrated in times where it is dynamic and diverse. So no formal titles, no hang-ups, no fancy jargons on designations. But at the end of the day, if wherever you are in the organization, if you can make an impact in whatever you do, then it's a matter of scale.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I have a question about the point you first mentioned, and that's a very good example that you use about a colleague who started this story circle. Now, as a leader, how do you deal with team members who have faced a setback? Like, what is the precedence or what is the culture that you like to uh, follow or set for the entire organization if someone comes up to you and talks about a difficult period in their job?
When Pragya, when I've observed the situation, especially when it comes to leaders being looked up as mentors, when team members come to them for advice or guidance or instructions, effective leaders, I believe, provide direction that really empowers their team members to clarify and build a lot of confidence. The way they've done it, and I can articulate a few points. Number one, it's very important that they listen first and they kind of diagnose and ask, what does it look like? Ask clarifying question, listen with a lot of empathy, understand what the real issue is, because whether it's about skills or decisions, at the end of the day, the person is coming up to the manager, the leader, to hear, something. Why does this matter? Because when a leader is treated like a mentor, it's not about giving answers right away, but it's also understanding what is being asked, how can they absorb it, and also bring in real time uh, personal experience so they can it's more relatable. Two, I think it's important to articulate the situation. What does it look like? How does the person feel right now? And when the person reframes that challenge and he understands that there is a solution, he can then connect it to the longer term outcomes. For example, the manager or the leader might say, okay, let's look at this decision in the longer term, maybe 1 year or 2 year down the line. Does that affect your personal or professional roadmap? Um, Three, and I think that's the most critical thing that I've observed leaders do it, is to also encourage ownership. When I say ownership, it should be that they gently push the employee or the team member to come up with options and self-reflect on consequences, because the person who's coming up also has a few solutions that he's already aware of, and he wants to hear from somebody to validate that. So
Right.
things like what are the few things you're considering, what are the few paths you're comfortable with, which is more aligned to your goals, right? So would you like to choose option number one or two, things like that. So these are probably ways a leader can provide directions and be a mentor to people who come up to him or her.
That's a very well thought answer, because
Yeah.
it takes a lot of courage for people to actually discuss their setbacks. But then, how are they actually guided, and how are their seniors or people who are way more experienced than them have navigated through similar situation can be a very helpful way of, again, driving culture in your organization. So thank you so much for that answer. And so, you know what, we've already answered a bit of this question, but I'd still like to discuss a few more points about
Sure.
when it comes to developing future leaders. What should we really be teaching them if we want them to shape the culture of the organization?
So having been in leadership development for the last 15 to 18 years, this is where I believe leadership development needs like a fundamental rethink. It needs a core redesign. And I'm not talking about competencies. I'm not talking about skill development. I'm talking about more of understanding this from a consciousness perspective. If we want leaders to shape a particular culture, we should be teaching them things which are more softer in nature, and things like around self-awareness, emotional intelligence, inclusivity. Like I said, these are not soft skills; these are actually power skills, because in today's age and time, they shape the what I call the emotional climate of the work, and none of this really stick without practice. So the key is not to train people within a classroom and you want them to develop this on theoretical concepts, and we hope that on a Monday morning when they come back it sticks. We as L&D leaders need to think of ways to embed these concepts, these designs, these thoughts into how they can use this in their practical day-to-day life. So as an L&D leader, this is my conscious attempt in whatever I do, in any interventions that I design, any courses or sessions that I lead. I want to make sure that my leadership development workshops are, one, experiential; two, they're contextual; and three, they're self-reflective, because the only person who's going through that program is the one who's going to go and apply it and reflect upon whether he's had this behavioral change or not.
Yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense, because, just bombarding learners with trainings
Yeah.
doesn't really help, especially in today's context. And maybe future leaders do need to be equipped more with the power skills that you mentioned. I really like that word.
Yeah.
And there needs to be more education around this. And can you share an example of a leadership development experience that helped shift culture in real and, in a lasting way?
Yeah. No, actually, this I keep sharing, this story, this anecdote, this thing which has inspired me a lot. Way back in 2018, when I was running my L&D startup, we were working with a regional bank with a mandate to, for leadership transformation, and there in a bank which is traditionally managed, the culture is very hierarchical, very very consensus driven. So idea was to change that mindset, and also they wanted to bring in more innovation and agility in the way the leaders and managers work. So instead of traditional training, which we had to do, we created something like an 8-week leadership lab. So the idea there was to have each leader choose one cultural behavior and which they wanted to shift, and then track that impact over the next few days with a checklist that we had given. So one of the things I remember which a manager did is he scrapped his Friday, what we call a stand-up connects today, which is a status meeting, and he turned that into an open conversation for 60 minutes, where all his team members they were encouraged to bring up, customer issues, feedback, team concerns, system issues, all of that, and that over time changed the way they were actually taking feedback, having conversations. And within weeks, all these people who were a part of that lab became more proactive, they were more curious. Um, Other leaders copied it, and that one move shifted the team from a very reactive mode to a very reflective mode. So for me, things like this teaches you that culture shifts through action. It is not by giving instructions, it's not putting them in a classroom, it is not giving them manuals, or it is not giving them resources. It is asking them to do something on their own, reflect upon it, learn from it, test it, reiterate it, and have others learn it, and then you'll have a lot of surprises like this that come across.
Yeah, I'm a strong believer in this, where
Yeah.
you can just see leaders around you and imbibe the best from them. In a few situations, I've also seen that negative connotations or negative leadership traits are also imbibed by the culture. So
Sure.
I'm so pro the answer that you gave,
Yeah.
that is very relevant in today's world. But coming to understanding the impact that leaders are making, because culture can often feel very abstract, and how do you know when a leader is truly shaping it in a positive way? Because it takes time to identify if a leader is actually going the right way, or are there any misses, are there any signals or stories or even feedback loops that you look out for?
In fact, I'm sure all of us have heard that, culture is what happens when your boss leaves the room. And I truly believe that, right? Because when I, have these conversations, I typically look for a few things when it comes to feedback and reinforcement. Number one is the leader, using words like belonging, shared wins, and is that coming up in his everyday conversations? And we, ask leaders to proactively start doing that if they're not. Two is, are others in the team, you know, sharing or mirroring these inclusive behaviors? Are they looking up to the leader and say, okay, I want to also have that same conversations. I want to behave and act or talk in a certain way. Three is, are employees, showing up voluntarily, right? Are they offering ideas? It's not about executing orders at the end of the day, right? It's about actively listening. Do the leaders do that? And also, that becomes a very strong indicator of a very healthy culture. So when people say things like, okay, it's different now, or I trust my leader, that's your, proof of the pudding. That's your evidence that, well, these things are making sense now.
Yeah, that's a very valid point, because maybe one of the ways that you would be looking out, from what I've understood from your answer, is that you might be making all the right moves, but if other people are not following it or other people are not understanding it, then it might not be very fruitful.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And this brings me to the last question, which is, as an L&D leader and a PhD researcher, which is very cool, what's one lesson about influence of culture that you carry with you every day?
See, I think culture is not something, like I said, it's not in the strategy deck or the manuals or documentation that we do. For me, the powerful reminder is that culture lives literally in every meeting, it's in every email, it's in every conversation that a leader has, and it's sometimes also happens in a very silent way. Um, the biggest leadership myth is, do we have the intention to do something? No, it has to be in action. So what matters is the impact, right? And leaders need to also take feedback. It has to be coming in constantly to them. They need to be honest about asking it, and they need to feel grounded when they get that feedback. So for me, culture is like a process. It's a practice that the leader, the organization build over time. And maybe if I can take uh, a quick example, it's like it's like a garden. Leaders need to keep watering the flowers and the trees to make sure that they don't wither. So it needs attention. That's what I'm saying. It needs attention, it needs care, it needs empathy from every leader who wants to practice and bring in a productive culture.
Yeah, that's perfectly put. And just one last question. What is your mantra to driving the culture? Or maybe just one mantra that you carry with yourself every day? That this is one thing that you remind yourself that you will ensure your team is looking at or is
Sure.
following.
I always believe that I don't believe in the old adage saying walk the talk. I believe in something saying walk the thought. So you should be very clear and articulate in terms of your thought process, and that is reflective of your actions. And we need to say what we are thinking. We need to be honest. We need to be upfront. We need to be straightforward within the boundaries that we have. But at the same time, we need to also expect honesty. We need to expect a very positive feedback. People should look up to us. And like I said, it's important to make sure that feedback is coming to us. We should encourage that from people. And like I said, it's important to keep watering your plant every day with all the attention and care and empathy.
Perfect. Thank you so much for all the answers. They were extremely insightful, and
Thank you.
I had a wonderful time. Thank you so much, Pawan.
Thank you. Thanks, Pragna. Thanks for this really fantastic interview. It also kind of clicked some of my parts of the brain to think of answers, think of pointers which I would not have thought of, because culture and leadership development is two different parts of the spectrum. They don't never really meet except in a boardroom. So thanks for this opportunity.
Yeah, our viewers are going to learn a lot from this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.